feeling very fortunate again with all of you. I just wanted to mention that those of you who turn on your screens, I really appreciate it. For the speaker, it helps a lot when we get feedback. So when we can see the audience. So if you are, if you are at your computer anyway, and if you can turn on your screens, please do turn them on. I know for some it's not possible. You may be, washing dishes while you're hearing or doing this or that. But if you are able to turn on your screen, please do so. Also, I apologize for missing last week. It was our university convocation. And somehow I thought I didn't have to go, but then I was informed that I do have to go. So I had to attend the convocation. The course is taking a little longer than I had initially expected or hoped. But I actually just received some information that greatly inspired me in terms of our own progress. Here in Naperville Temple, they're also teaching Bhakti Shastri for the local community. They teach Bhakti Shastri and they do it once a week, meeting about 2 or 3 hours a week. And it takes them 2.5 years to complete the Bhakti Shastri. Minimum 2 years, but generally about 2.5 years to complete the whole course. And their first batch is now just graduating after 2 years and about 2 years and 2 months. So we have had some delays, but we're still doing very well. After this class, we have 2 more classes. That's my understanding. And then we'll be done with the Isopanisad. And we'll have completed the whole course in about 1 year, which is very good. When we're not doing it full time, then completing it in 1 year is a great accomplishment for all of you. You've stuck through, and there's only a few more classes left. So please stay until the finish line. I know this is the holiday season, and it's everyone is busy, everyone is traveling. But thank you for your patience when I miss classes, and thank you for your enthusiasm in attending these classes. So I will share my screen so we can look at the slides here. Today we're doing verses 9, 10, and 11. Yeah, so after this we have 2 more classes, and then we'll have our final exams for these 2 books, Nectar of Instruction and Isopanisad. We'll have 1 exam for both of them. Yes, 2 more classes. Okay. So this is Sri Isopanisad mantras 9, 10, and 11. Once again, I'd like to thank Mother Urmila for these slides, which she's made so nicely. This is a slight overview of the mantras that we are going to cover today. Very deep mantras. It's amazing actually how deep this Upanishad is, how wonderful this Isopanisad is, and it's very wonderful. Did I share my screen? Can you all see it? No.
Not in Prabhuji. No, Prabhuji. We can't see.
Okay, sorry. Yes. Okay, and now you can see it, right? Okay, so this is the overview of these 3 verses. Mantras 9 to 11 speak about ignorance and pseudo knowledge, which lead to darkness. Real knowledge leads to eternal life. So this is the knowledge that these verses give. This is Sambandha. Abhideya, the practical application. In mantra 11, we learn the nescience and transcendental knowledge side by side. So the practical application is that we should learn nescience and transcendental knowledge side by side, which is very surprising, and that's part of the interesting aspect of these verses. And finally, the goal, which is mantra 11, is we transcend birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So prayojana, the goal, is that the result of this knowledge and this practical application is transcending death and enjoying eternal life. So in mantras 9 to 11, as you can see in this diagram, we have the guidelines for knowledge. This is giving us the guidelines for gaining knowledge. These verses specifically focus on knowledge. They're specifically about knowledge, which is actually a very important, very big topic in our Vedic scriptures, and is in some ways the most essential question, because it's based on knowledge, it's based on jnana, that we do anything in this world, especially our bhakti. Our bhakti is grounded in jnana. So what is correct knowledge? What is incorrect knowledge? How to apply knowledge? All of these things are being instructed to us in these verses. Having received the complete vision of the Sri Isopanisad in the invocation and mantras 1 to 8, we now receive further guidelines on which types of knowledge to seek and which types of practices to follow, so that we may also realize this vision. We begin with guidelines for knowledge in mantras 9, 10, and 11. So until now, we've received the knowledge of the absolute. You may remember the previous verses were speaking about the nature of God. And now, after giving us this sort of full vision, the Isopanisad is teaching us about the nature of getting more knowledge about Krishna and avoiding materialistic knowledge. So this is mantra 9. Andham tam maha pravishanti yo vidyam upasate tato bhuya ibate tamo yau vidyayam zrata. Andham tama pravishanti ye vidyam upasate tato bhuya ibate tamo yau vidyayam zrata. Those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. Once again, those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. So the essence of mantra 9 is that those who neglect spiritual knowledge enter into darkness. And neglecting spiritual knowledge is of two types, like the verse has described. One is materialistic knowledge, or really ignorance, and the other is so-called spiritual knowledge, which Prabhupada explains in the purport very nicely. Mantra 9 states that those who neglect spiritual knowledge shall be covered by darkness and ignorance, especially those who actively impede such knowledge. We can fuel this discovering of darkness. We can feel this discovering of darkness or frustration in modern society, where we are so advanced in material knowledge, yet we ignore or even avoid spiritual education. People are more confused as to the purpose of life than ever. Material knowledge is certainly necessary and even beneficial, as long as it is engaged in the Lord's service. But when it ignores spiritual life, such material knowledge is just another form of ignorance, which distracts us from our actual goal of realizing our eternal nature as spirit souls. Those who commit the worst harm to society are those who pretend to cultivate spiritual knowledge, but only misinterpret scriptural teachings. How powerful these sentences are, these passages. Here, a few points to note that Srila Prabhupada is saying that material knowledge is certainly necessary and even beneficial as long as it is engaged in the Lord's service. So material knowledge here, and also we'll see in the later verse, is not being condemned in the Isopanisad. In fact, it's being seen as something that is necessary and even beneficial. For example, and a city or a town can only build a temple if there's an architect who can design it and who knows how to, arrange the rocks and the trees and the wood in such a way that the building will not fall down. So material knowledge is necessary to build a temple, and it's beneficial because then you have a temple that doesn't break. But that material knowledge is only beneficial if it is engaged in the Lord's service. Otherwise, that material knowledge is ignorance, and it draws us into the deepest realms of nescience. Ignorance is already there, nescience is already there. But when we pursue material education, material knowledge, without serving the Lord, without engaging it in the service of the Lord, then that nescience becomes even greater. It becomes even more dangerous because it's more harmful. Just like there's actually studies done that some of the top crimes in terms of intelligent crimes are committed by students at Harvard, top universities, MIT. They're the ones who are doing this because they have intelligence. And if a person has a ill intention, then they use that intelligence for even a worse purpose, a more detrimental purpose. And so this is material knowledge. But then Prabhupada says, even worse harm than this is those who pretend to cultivate spiritual knowledge, but only misinterpret spiritual teachings. So those who teach religion, but in fact they're teaching materialism. Those who are, claiming that they are offering spiritual knowledge, but in fact it is just a veiled form of ignorance. Just like we see in India, there are many sadhus who teach forms of meditation and nirakar and these forms of meditation. And personally, I've seen in my own family, in my extended family, how like my aunt, she became very attracted to one such guru, and he was living in Vrindavan. But he teaches that there's, Lord Krishna is a human being. There is no God, personal God, and God is your own soul. Your own soul is God. And he also has some mystic power. In other words, he has some, material mystical potencies. And due to this, he attracts disciples. And so my aunt is to this day very attached to him. And she's removed the deities of Radha and Krishna from her home. She's, such a nice person, so devotional. She was an exemplary devotee. But by the so-called spiritual knowledge, worse still is so-called spiritual knowledge. This verse is saying, due to that lack of proper guidance and being misguided by the pretenders, the false spiritualists, she's become more confused than those who are in materialism. Those who are in materialism just don't know the truth. But those who are so-called spiritualists, they know the truth, yet they're hiding it due to their envy of the Supreme Lord. Due to being envious of Krishna, they are hiding that. This mantra offers a comparative study of Vidya and Avidya, Avidya or ignorance is undoubtedly dangerous, but vidya or knowledge is even more dangerous when mistaken or misguided. This mantra of Sri Isopanisad is more applicable today than at any time in the past. Modern civilization has advanced considerably in the field of mass education, but the result is that people are more unhappy than ever before because of the stress placed on material advancement to the exclusion of the most important part of life, the spiritual aspect. So the modern world, the new world, and I'm in the field of education, so I know this very much. It's all about education. The new age, they donate to education. Education never has a shortage of funding because all problems in this world are solved by education. The solution is education, and that's true. Knowledge. Krishna says in the Gita that there's nothing in this world more sublime than transcendental knowledge. Knowledge is very powerful. Knowledge is power. But if there's no spiritual knowledge, that education or the process of education becomes such a burden, it literally kills the human spirit. Rather than making a better person, it actually dulls the mind. And I can say that for my own self after doing a bachelor's, a master's, a second master's, and then a PhD. It's like almost your mind becomes numb, right, by this material education. And this is what is happening. The mind has no, people today, because of their material education, they have no opportunity, no avenue to cultivate spiritual knowledge. They have lost that spirit. There's one famous aphorism. They say that don't let college classes come in the middle of your education. Right? People realize that all these classes, they take all this information, but there's no cultivation of knowledge. There's no true meaning in knowledge. And this is, though people have such big degrees, there are so many qualifications, yet when they are actually in the workforce, they fail. This is a fact in school principals, for example. They say something like 30 to 40% of school principals fail. And then they look into the reasons why they failed, and they find that the main reason is a lack of character and ethics. And so now in universities, they're recognizing this and they're trying to teach character and ethics. But the fact is that even a person can take so many courses in ethics, but until there's a culture of spiritual life, until there's a practice of spiritual life, we may have that knowledge also, but it makes very little or no difference. They still go out and perform scandalous activities. So material education is actually hardening the heart. It's making people more hard-hearted, less human, less compassionate, less kind. If it is not combined with spiritual education. It's interesting, in the Chinese traditions, Lao Tzu says the same thing. He says give up education and give up the end to your troubles. Very famous line by Lao Tzu, who's the founder of Taoism. He was not into education that's very taxing. He said education is through inner contemplation, through meditation, having time to chant, having time to reflect on the verses of the scriptures. That is real education, not just cramming. Of course, as we will see, to find a balance. We also need material education to some degree. Very interesting purport, very nice for young people, for if you have a teenager at home, to show them, to read to them. But the spiritual aspect is most important. Similarly, Confucius, in the Chinese traditions, he said that one had to cultivate character, one had to cultivate empathy and harmony. And in this way, along with education, which he greatly believed in, he taught rituals, religious rituals. Why? Because he said by practicing rituals, people would learn how to work in harmony. And if you look at the Confucian rituals, It's thousands of people. They all take the same step to the left, to the right, to the same music, and they perform these very beautiful ceremonies that bring everyone together, and they teach respect, character. Uh, he has so many teachings also on what a good human being is. So in this way, the knowledge was there, the education was there, but it was very reflective. It was not just on to how to twist wires, or deal with wires, and all these things. So the definition of ignorance: the invocation explained the essence of real knowledge, that the Supreme Lord is the owner and controller of everything. The absence of that is ignorance. So the absence of the knowledge that Krishna is the controller and owner of everything, therefore we should serve him, the Ishavasya principle and the invocation is knowledge. Everything else is ignorance. The killers of the soul are also defined here, that material knowledge kills the soul. It actually does, right? Material knowledge kills the soul, and material ignorance, being materially ignorant also, so just being drunk, or that also kills the soul. So both materially ignorant and material knowledge. And in the purport, Prabhupada mentions more explicitly, what does this exactly mean? So this is very much in resonance with Bhagavad Gita 7:15. These two categories of people can be sort of expanded into these four, and then furthermore, what is mentioned below. The fool is someone who is materially ignorant. Simply, like Prabhupada says, a person who works day and night like an ass, with no understanding or desire for something higher, for spiritual knowledge, for knowledge of life after death. So just being a mudha or a fool, working for material paltry pleasure day and night, is considered avidya. The lowest among men, those who are acting sinfully, drinking, smoking, breaking the four principles. Those whose knowledge is stolen by ignorance, maya parhita jnana. So this is those whose knowledge is stolen by illusion or ignorance. These people, they have knowledge, but their knowledge is stolen by illusion. They misapply that knowledge, or they misunderstand that knowledge. And finally, the outright atheists, these openly deny the existence of God. They say there's no God, there's no purpose in this world. Everything is blind, pitiless darkness. And Prabhupada, particularly as was mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, you may remember this, he talks about the Veda Vada Ratas. So these are the so-called knowledge group. These are the people who study the Vedas. They apparently live their life according to Vedic injunctions, but they use the Vedas for their own sense gratification. Just like many devotees also do this, where they ignore one teaching of the scriptures in favor of another because it facilitates their sense gratification, rather than seeing the essence, the primary teaching of the scriptures. They pick and choose for their own sense gratification. Similarly, you have the Maya Parithigyanas, those who teach Mayavada philosophy. These are those who, again, are who have knowledge, but it's stolen by illusion due to their envy of the Lord. They are wanting to become God themselves. So these are examples of those with so-called knowledge. George Bernard Shaw, he is famously also said, "Be aware of false knowledge. It is more dangerous than ignorance." So many times as devotees, we have the knowledge, but we want to pretend like that knowledge isn't there, it doesn't exist. Prabhupada said we can wake up a sleeping person, but we cannot wake up someone who is pretending that they're sleeping. And he said this is the problem with the Indians in India or abroad or wherever. They have the spiritual knowledge, they have the spiritual culture, they know about Bhagavad Gita, but because they have the knowledge, and even though they have it, they don't want to follow it. And therefore, it's very hard to change their habits because they're openly, intentionally avoiding it. Whereas someone who is in ignorance, who just doesn't have the spiritual knowledge, when you give it to them, then they're very happy to embrace it, very happy to take it. And that is preaching to the innocent. That is so nice. Well, they don't have it. It's not really their fault. You give it and they embrace it. So ignorance is bad, but more dangerous because is false knowledge. Because to an ignorant person, when you give them knowledge, they'll accept it and take it. But to someone who has false knowledge, when you even give it to them, they won't take it. And that's why it's more dangerous. That's why we see it's sometimes hard to change the mind of devotees because they have the knowledge, but they don't want to accept it because they have the anarthas in their heart. They're not ready to take it. The spiritual master tells them that be humble, be tolerant, be merciful. They know that, but it's just not, the knowledge is there, but the heart isn't ready. And so that takes some time. That takes some purification that happens over time. And then we are able to act on that knowledge. But Prabhupada often said, he said, we may not be able to perform the practices of bhakti or rise to the platform that the scriptures are asking us to do. But we should never question the principle. We should never question or try to water down the philosophy itself. Just like a very, you could say, controversial issue in ISKCON, or you could say a very common example is in terms of the four principles, right? And especially the fourth principle. And many devotees, they say, well, this isn't necessary to follow. And other devotees say, no, that Prabhupada has clearly said we must follow this, but I'm just not there. And I'm striving to follow it. So the first one is incorrect. That is the wrong approach. That is false knowledge, to try to find quotes or find ways in which to justify and say that no, actually, the principle is not true. But the second aspect, the second one, that no, I am not there, but I'm practicing. I'm endeavoring to reach that point. But that is the goal. That is what Srila Prabhupada has said, which many devotees have confirmed, and it's there in his books. I'm going to follow it one day. That is the correct approach to take. Ignorance and pseudo-knowledge, the advancement of learning by a godless person, is as dangerous as a valuable jewel in the hood of a cobra. A cobra decorated with a valuable jewel is more dangerous than one not decorated. So, Rupa Goswami talks about the professional reciters of the Bhagavatam. The professional reciters who are interested in money and women, they are more dangerous than people who are just interested in money and women. Why? Because they're using that spiritual knowledge for the wrong purpose. They have the power of the spiritual knowledge and they're misapplying. Another nice example is the interpretations of the Bhagavad Gita. So many people, political leaders and non-political leaders, have used the Bhagavad Gita for their own purpose, because the Bhagavad Gita is a very powerful book. But Prabhupada used to say, whatever we want to do, we can do. But he said, why are you using the Gita for your own purposes? If we want to teach the Gita, if we want to study the Gita, then we should teach it in the way that Krishna has taught it. Then be true to the author, be true to the text. Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja, mam ekam sharanam raja. That just surrender unto me. That is the highest teaching of the Gita. Why are you changing it? So not reading the Gita is very bad, but reading the Gita from a materialistic person is even more dangerous, because now we've gone to spiritual life. We've gone to the Lord. That very source of our shelter, which is spiritual knowledge and Krishna's instructions, a person is coming there, and now they're being misled. So now then what is the recourse? You see, that's why the false religionists do the greatest harm to society, disservice to society. Because, okay, it's one thing that someone's in materialism, they're not interested in spiritual life. But there's another thing that someone has finally, desperately come to spiritual life, but still they're not getting the right guidance. They're being misguided. And what a great harm that is. What a great loss that is. Wolves are dangerous, and wolves dressed as sheep are even more dangerous. Because from a real wolf, from a wolf that looks like a wolf, you can stay away. You know what it is. But wolf dressed in sheep, you don't know. They come as sadhus, but they're more dangerous. Ignorance and pseudo-knowledge. Why is ignorance dangerous? We will think and do things which will lead to suffering and make it difficult, which will make it difficult to come to the right path. Ignorance and pseudo-knowledge. Why is pseudo-knowledge worse than ignorance? A nice example here is given that the walls of the room are ignorance. The glass window is pseudo-knowledge. And the open door is knowledge. A bird trying to get out is likely to waste time and energy on the glass window, and therefore not even attempt to find the open door. Such a nice example, right? Ignorance is like the walls that we have. Obviously, anyone with some common sense can see this is not spirituality. But false knowledge is like the opening in a room that has glass on it. It looks like it's an opening, but it's not. And we can waste an entire lifetime. People spend an entire lifetime. How sad. In doing, Buddhist meditation and not meditating on God, just on some spot, a black spot or some emptiness. And so much time is wasted. And they're thinking they're making real spiritual progress. So that's like the glass, and the open door is real, genuine spiritual knowledge. So Prabhupada gives examples of knowledge, nationalism and modern universities. These do not pretend to be spiritual, but they do claim to give knowledge, which will lead to a happy life. So also we should not identify knowledge that is not true knowledge. So yes, the universities give us a false promise of knowledge. And universities, again, are important. We have to study, get some material education, but they're secondary to real spiritual knowledge. So now we have mantra 10. We've completed mantra 9, in which the Isopanisad speaks about the nescience, ignorance, and pseudo-knowledge. Anya divahur vidyaya, nyadahur avidyaya, iti shushru madhirana, yenastad vichachakshire. The wise have explained that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge, and that a different result is obtained from the culture of nescience. So having described what the culture of nescience is, which is material knowledge and so-called spiritual knowledge, or just ignorance, now Isopanisad is saying that one result is derived from the culture of knowledge and the other from the culture of nescience. One result from cultivating spiritual knowledge, another from neglecting it. Mantra 9 describes the results of cultivating ignorance and false knowledge. Mantra 10 explains that true knowledge brings a different result than either of these. It also emphasizes the need to take guidance from Adhira in the act of discriminating between real and illusory knowledge. So now, in order to separate the milk from the water, we need guidance. We need to discriminate between real and illusory knowledge, which look like one another. It's like the sheep in wolf's clothing and the sheep, right? To the untrained eye, so in the previous verse, it says, those who enter into the darkest, they enter into the darkest regions of ignorance. So the result there has already been told. Now they will tell the result of cultivating spiritual knowledge. In Mantra 10, we hear from authorities that a certain result is derived from culturing spiritual knowledge, and a different result is derived from neglecting such knowledge. Because knowledge of the soul is not being taught in modern education, there's animosity in all social, political, and religious fields today. As we attempt to dominate this material nature more and more, not considering its creator or purpose, the result is we fall more and more into fighting and war. Along with cultivating knowledge of this spiritual world, we must also acquire spiritual knowledge from the self-realized souls who understand our common eternal spiritual nature in relation to the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada mentioned this on many occasions. He said how we have, or one of his disciples was explaining it this way, that we have about 30 years of an adult life in which we can really make a change. Our young years are gone into, play and education, our older years and sort of taking care of our old age. But we have like 30 years in terms of a real active life when we are somewhat independent in an adult life, that we can do things. And in those 30 years, we can decide if we want to perform activities that lead us to ignorance and bondage, that make us into a worm and stool, to be very blunt. And I'm quoting him here, not myself. Or as a result of the 30 years, we can go back home, back to Godhead, and we can dance with Krishna. So that is the two paths, the culture of nescience and the culture of knowledge. This life, we can cultivate the culture of nescience more, as we've done for so many lifetimes, and we can again end up in the cycle of rebirth and go to the animal species of life. Or this life, we can give it to Krishna, and we can go back home, back to Godhead. So how important is our spiritual life? How less important are other things in this world that we spend so much time on and that we waste so much time on? Prabhupada said this. Now, this is Srila Prabhupada. He said that if we just give one life to Krishna, then we can break out of this cycle. We've had so many lifetimes in this material world, so many lifetimes where we become judges, where we become parents, where we become children, mothers, fathers, brothers. All of these things we have done. And now we have this one opportunity. We've received the association of devotees. We've received the mercy of the spiritual master. We've received the scriptures. And if we just give this one life to Krishna, then we can go back home, back to Godhead. So just give this one life. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj said that Srila Prabhupada gave him this, said this to him, gave him this instruction. Because he gave his life to Srila Prabhupada. He, from the very beginning, decided to become a lifelong brahmachari, lifelong celibate. He surrendered his life to Srila Prabhupada very devoutly. And after his initiation, it is customary that the disciple gives the guru some diksha, some dakshina. They bring some money and they give it to Srila Prabhupada. So Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he went and begged some money from the devotees, and he didn't have any money of his own. He had no money to add to that. So he comes to Srila Prabhupada and he says, Srila Prabhupada, I have very little to offer you. This is all everything that I could collect. And Prabhupada said, that is okay. You have given me your life. So other people have given money, but you have given me your life, and that is greater. So Bhakti Charu Maharaj said that Srila Prabhupada was very intelligent, was the greatest, most intelligent person, because at that point, in responding to his humility, he was saying, oh, Prabhupada, I could only offer you this. Prabhupada, in responding to his very small offering, Prabhupada at that time took claim of his life. Prabhupada, in some ways, took charge of his life at that point. He forced him to give his life to Srila Prabhupada. He said, okay, you don't have money to give me, but that's okay. I've taken your life. Your life is for me. So therefore, he could understand after that he had that Srila Prabhupada had accepted him. So in this purport, Prabhupada mentions 18 principles of the culture of knowledge. So knowledge is not information. You'll notice Prabhupada uses this word, it's very key, the culture of knowledge. Knowledge is actually culture. If we have no culture, we have no knowledge. And if we have knowledge, we have a certain culture. Very key point, that you cannot separate knowledge from culture. If a person is not cultured in their behavior, then they're also not knowledgeable. In modern society, it's exactly opposite. People have PhDs. They have no culture, no character. They don't know how to behave in society. But because they have the PhD, they'll get a huge, high-paying job. And actually, someone was saying that people are recognizing that this is a vice in modern society, that very unqualified people who have not so much good character, they're in very high positions. And therefore, society is being misguided. Because why? You get a job opportunity based on the degree that you have, not based upon who you are. And therefore, knowledge is separated from culture. But in spiritual life, culture and knowledge are the same thing. So these are the 18 principles of knowledge that Prabhupada mentions in the purport. You can read them also in your own time. One should become a perfect gentleman and learn to give proper respect to others. First principle of knowledge, giving proper respect to others. I was just listening to a class from Jayadvaita Maharaj where he was saying the same thing, that how Indian culture, Vedic culture, a cultured person means that they know how to give respect to the elders. And he said, if we don't know how to do that, we have no culture. 2, one should not pose himself as a religionist simply for name and fame. One should not pose himself as a religionist. So becoming, a charismatic spiritual leader for name and fame, but not practicing oneself. One should not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. So wonderful. I mean, you can see how this is the perfect knowledge. I mean, this sentence encompasses everything. It avoids all forms of abuse. The point is, if we are giving anxiety to anyone, that may be our husband, our wife, our child, our parents, our our friends, our neighbors, then that is nescience. A devotee does not become a source of anxiety to others by the actions of his body, by the thoughts of his mind, or by his words. Right? Sometimes we can be in a situation where we have leverage on someone else. And this is going to be a complete stranger, someone, you can think back in your life, like we have leverage where we can, put another person into anxiety uh, as a way of punishing them for their own fault, or as a way of kind of doing the right thing. This person deserves it, and so you put them in anxiety. As a professor, for example, as a teacher, I can attest to this. There's so many ways I can put my students into anxiety if they don't, fulfill their coursework. I can be hard on them and give them a lot of anxiety. But that is not our role as aspiring devotees. We devotee, the ultimate justice is mercy. The devotee is kind. He acts in a way not to give others anxiety. We have to say the truth. We have to say the right thing. We do the right thing. And we give them spiritual knowledge. That's our role. Giving them punishment or anxiety is really not our role. That's more Krishna's role, or the role of the king, of the government. One should learn forbearance, even in the face of provocation from others. Very powerful. One should learn forbearance. Forbearance means even in the face of provocation from others. Others are provoking us, they're teasing us. But how should we respond? We should be forbearant. One should learn to avoid duplicity in his dealings with others. We should not be duplicitous. That actually we have something else in mind, we have another goal in mind, but we're saying something else. Duplicity, devotee is very straightforward. One should search out a bona fide spiritual master who can lead him gradually to the stage of spiritual realization. And one must submit himself to such a spiritual master, render him service, and ask relevant questions. So finding guidance, finding the spiritual master is very important. And then submitting oneself and rendering service to that spiritual master is very important. One devotee mentioned how we can even be in this society and be initiated, but have the mentality of a Ritvik. The mentality of a Ritvik is that I have my spiritual master, but I don't need to serve them. I don't need to connect with them. I don't need to hear them. I don't need to meet them. It's just my big guru out there who I can, just see a picture and be happy. So sometimes we're not Ritviks. We do take initiation from our guru, but there's no effort on our part to try to follow their instructions, to try to take guidance from them, to try to, render service to them. The guru is not just there like a deity. The guru is there for service, to ask questions. One devotee was trying to set an appointment with his spiritual master to see his spiritual master. And that devotee felt like he was a very busy, like the devotee himself felt that he was very busy. So he wanted to set an appointment with his spiritual master so that he could, he's sure to meet his guru. And his spiritual master responded. He said that that meeting the spiritual master is not like going to the doctor, where you set up an appointment and you have your appointment, you go and meet him once a year. I've done it. I met my guru, I got my blessings, I got my medicine, and I leave. The meeting of the spiritual master is one of, submission and service. You have to wait. You have to try to get his blessings, get his audience. Not that I'm on this busy schedule. I have 2 jobs. I'm a PhD and I need to meet you, Guru Maharaj, at 3 o'clock on Thursday evening. No, if we see the lives of the acharyas, like Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he waited for days, for weeks and months that his spiritual master would accept him. in the Upanishad, we see when a disciple needed a question answered, they would go to the spiritual master, and the spiritual master would say, come back after 100 years, perform austerities for 100 years, then come back, I'll answer your question. Or they would respond, oh no, I'm busy, or I'm serving the Lord, I cannot speak to you right now, come back later. Then they come back later again, then again they're busy, then they come back later again. So the disciple, only when he's qualified, when he's in the right state of mind, will the disciple get the chance to converse and meet with the spiritual master. So one has to make that effort, have that mood of submission and service. That is the important point. Not the acceptance of the spiritual master can be very, can be done. But what is the real acceptance? That mood of submission and service and wanting to get the mercy of the spiritual master. So many times we find in the lives of the Vaishnava Acharyas also that, who was it? I'm forgetting, but another example of, maybe it was Gaurkishore Das Babaji. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur came and said, please initiate me. And he said, I need to ask Lord Chaitanya if I can do this. Or maybe it was Lokanath Goswami in relation to, I forget. Anyway, so then he goes back and he says, what did the Lord say? And he says, I forgot to ask him. He says, I forgot to ask Lord Chaitanya if I should initiate you. I'll ask him tonight. And so then he goes back to him again. I think this is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj responds, I asked him, but Lord Chaitanya did not respond. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur goes back to him again, and he says that now if you don't give me your shelter, I will commit suicide. And then Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, to save the life of such an advanced devotee, of a great soul like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he says, okay, I will give you initiation. And he accepts him as his disciple. Number 7, in order to approach the platform of self-realization, one must follow the regulated principles enjoined in the revealed scriptures. 8, one must be fixed in the tenets of the revealed scriptures. 9, one should completely refrain from practices which are detrimental to the interest of self-realization. So later on also we talk about this, how cultivating nescience, the knowledge of nescience also. And what does that mean? So here it's being mentioned that we should completely refrain from practices which are detrimental to the interests of self-realization. So how do we understand these two things? Where Prabhupada has just said that material education can be helpful or even beneficial, and we should completely refrain from practices or studies, so to say, that are detrimental. Well, one example to understand this is like in the Gita, Krishna says that one should be moderate in his activities of eating, sleeping, and recreation. So Krishna says one should take some recreation because he's saying we should be moderate. So what does that mean? Should a devotee be a sense enjoyer? Because Krishna says we should have recreation. So Baladev Vidyabhushan, in his commentary, he says that this statement of recreation that Krishna is mentioning here, that a devotee should be regulated in recreation, it means that from time to time, the devotee should go on walks. The devotee should go for a walk. So the point is that this is the level. Just to have an understanding of the material things needed for the Lord's service, we deal with material things. Like in the case of recreation, one would think, oh, one who wants to be take sort of advantage of that, we may say, oh, see, Krishna says I should be a tennis player and I should team. But no, Baladev Vidyabhushan sort of smashes all that. And he says, no, it means one should go on walks. And we see Prabhupada did that. He went on a nice morning walk, which is a form of, you could say, enjoyment. You go for a walk, it's nice, beautiful, fresh air. But that is not detrimental. That is being regulated in one's recreation. That much recreation is good enough for a devotee. One should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body. So accepting that which is required, not living in luxury, not over-accepting, but just what is required for the maintenance of the body. On this point, I can mention that many times Krishna blesses us with more Lakshmi than we need. And we think, well, okay, I have this Lakshmi, so should I just lead a comfortable life because I have this money? And yes, that is true to some extent, but also we must remember that whatever Lakshmi we have, if Krishna has blessed us with more Lakshmi than what we need, that is Krishna's Lakshmi, right? This is Krishna's money. And so we should still lead a simple life. And that additional that Krishna has given us, we should use it in Krishna's service. And a nice example of a devotee actually who was living like this. In Logan, Utah, there's Charu Prabhu and his wife Vaidarbi, who established the beautiful temples there in Spanish Fork and Salt Lake City. And in the beginning, it was just the two of them, and they would go and collect money by selling cookies. They built at that time, $1 million temple, and $1 million at that time was a lot more than it is now. Just by selling cookies. They'd sell a cookie, get $1. Like this, they sold hundreds of thousands of cookies and also some other things and earned that money. And this was their own business, so to say. They earned it themselves. It was their own money. And so by this, they became a millionaire. But the devotees there tell us that when Charu Prabhu would go to buy clothes, he would go to the second-hand Goodwill store and find trousers there and buy those. Though he had $1 million in his bank account, he would go to the store and just buy this second-hand store. He wouldn't even spend money on expensive clothes. They also drove a very simple car, had a very simple lifestyle. And he took that $1 million and he built this beautiful temple in the heart of Utah, in the middle of Christians and Mormons, and started Krishna consciousness there. And now they've built 2 temples of the same size, same beauty. So this is that principle. One should not accept more than he requires for the maintenance of the body, and everything else should go for the service of the Lord. One should not falsely identify himself with a gross material body, nor should one consider those who are related to his body to be his own. Wow, very difficult. One should not falsely identify with the gross body and should not consider those who are related to his body to be his own. When I was in New Vrindavan, then Varsana Maharaj told me this. Also, he said that I asked him, how in household life can we remain in a spiritual consciousness when there's so much, responsibility for the children and the family and this and that. And he said that we have to remember that our children are not our children, they are Krishna's children. They're Krishna's children, not our children. So that way we can remember that everyone is meant for the service of the Lord. Everyone belongs to the Lord. One should always remember that as long as he has a mature body, he must face the miseries of repeated birth, old age, disease, and death. There is no use in making plans to get rid of these miseries of the material body. The best course is to find out the means by which one may regain his spiritual identity. So these problems of the material body will always come. We must take care of it, but we should not make big plans on how to remove these miseries because there's no solution to them. The best solution is to regain one's spiritual identity by following the regulated principles of the scriptures and being fixed in the tenets of the scriptures by following the regulated principles and chanting Hare Krishna. One should not be attached to more than the necessities of life required for spiritual advancement. I think we covered this point. One should not be more attached to wife, children, and home than the revealed scriptures ordained. We should also cover this point. One should be happy or distressed. One should not be happy or distressed over desirables and undesirables, knowing that such feelings are just created by the mind. We also covered this point to some degree, that we should be matra sparshas tukonteya shitosha sukha dukkada. That we should be stable, we should be steady in happiness and distress. In spiritual life, there isn't room for getting, losing our temper, getting too angry, blowing up. These are not good for our spiritual life. We solving a problem, we must solve it very clearly through our intelligence. We should through our arguments, through rational thinking. We should go forward. We should not allow the modes of nature to overcome us and become too happy or too distressed. One should become an unalloyed devotee of the personality of God as Sri Krishna and serve him with rapt attention. And of course, this is the solution. Becoming an unalloyed devotee of the Lord, serving Krishna, automatically our material problems, our material shortcomings are removed. One should develop a liking for a residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere, favorable for spiritual culture. And one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. One should develop a liking for residence in a secluded place with a calm and quiet atmosphere, favorable for spiritual culture. And one should avoid congested places where non-devotees congregate. So a devotee can live in the most congested cities in the world. In fact, they want to preach Krishna consciousness, but they're not attached to living in downtown. It's amazing. So many people, they spend $1 million for a condo to live in the most congested places, that is downtown Chicago or downtown New York. It's unbelievable because they like that. They want the bars, the nightlife, and all the congestion. There's no shortage of sense enjoyment. One should become a scientist or philosopher and conduct research into spiritual knowledge, recognizing that spiritual knowledge is permanent, whereas material knowledge ends with the death of the body. So here's where we see also material education, where it can be used. One of the principles of knowledge is that one should become a scientist or philosopher, but one should conduct research in spiritual knowledge and try to establish that knowledge which is permanent and not worry about material knowledge, which ends with the body. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that devotees should become high court judges. And he said, the society will change when devotees become high court judges, and with tilak, they are making their decisions. Because so much is in the hand of the judges, we see, right? All this whole abortion controversy, ultimately it's being settled by the judges. The fate of the lives of millions of small children, of millions of souls who are living in this world, is in the hands of 7 or 8 judges. So I try to encourage young devotees to become high court judges. And recently, one of them actually decided to go in that route, to go down the route of with the career goal of becoming a judge. It's so nice, we can become, I don't know, we can become NASA specialist and all these things, but we should also see in what roles can we have influence on society. As a judge, why Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying you have so much influence on society. You can change the course of people's lives. So a counselor, a judge, Prabhupada here is saying a scientist can become also, has so much influence. A philosopher, these people have influence in society. After describing these 18 principles of knowledge, Prabhupada has this very nice quote in the purport. He says, in modern society, even a boy thinks himself self-sufficient and pays no respect to elderly men due to the wrong type of education being imparted in our universities. Boys all over the world are giving their elders headaches. Thus, Sri Isopanisad very strongly warns that the culture of nescience is different from that of knowledge. The universities are, so to speak, centers of nescience only. University students today are not given instructions in the regulated principles of brahmacharya, celibate student life, nor do they have any faith in any scriptural injunctions. Mantra 10 purport. Yes. So the culture of knowledge is very important to cultivate, not just knowledge, but the culture of knowledge. Sri Isopanisad, as the authorized scripture, this mantra states that the instructions of Vidya, knowledge, must be acquired from Adhira. Adhira is one who is not disturbed by material illusion. No one can be undisturbed unless he is perfectly spiritually realized, at which time one neither hankers nor laments for anything. Adhira realizes that the material body and mind he has acquired by chance through material association are but foreign elements. Therefore, he simply makes the best use of a bad bargain. One can become Adhira only by submissively hearing from a bona fide spiritual master. Arjuna, for example, became Adhira by submissively hearing from Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The personality of Godhead himself. Thus, the perfect disciple must be like Arjuna, and the spiritual master must be as good as the Lord himself. This is the process of learning Vidya, knowledge, from the Dhira, the undisturbed. This sentence is very important. Adhira realizes that the material body and mind he has acquired by chance through material association are but foreign elements. Therefore, he simply makes the best use of a bad bargain. So we have that material association. We are born in it, and we're making the best use of a bad bargain. We're trying to make the best of it by engaging it in the Lord's service. And this is possible only by taking instructions from the Dhira, the sober person. We remember in the Gita, Krishna also talks about the Dhira. And finally, mantra 11, last mantra that we are covering. Vidyam cha yas tadvedo bhayam saha avidyaya mrityum tirtva vidyayam mrita ashrute. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Once again, only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So, So here, the Isopanisad is speaking about cultivating material and spiritual knowledge side by side. Well, material knowledge is about eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So how do we, or why should we cultivate these vices of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, along with hearing and chanting and worshiping the Lord? Weren't we supposed to give up these things? Very good question. This is what is being answered in this purport. The previous two mantras have explained that ignorance and false knowledge bind one and are in contrast to true knowledge. Mantra 11 describes how one must know the relative positions of material and spiritual knowledge to transcend the material energy and attain deathlessness. So, key point here is that knowledge of nescience, learning the process of nescience, is not the same as engaging in nescience or becoming nescient. Rather, gaining that material knowledge allows us to see the relative positions of material and spiritual knowledge. Just like Srila Prabhupada in his beautiful song that he wrote on the Jaladuta, He says how, he quotes a verse from the Bhagavatam of Prahlad Maharaj, where Prahlad Maharaj says how this material life is so bad. And he says, now I have factually experienced it by seeing, how his father was trying to kill him, and all the demons and all those things. And Prabhupada then says this about his own life, that how at the end, neither his children nor his family, no one cared for him once he lost his business. And with that, he could understand that this is what material life is. So this is knowledge of nescience. Knowledge of nescience doesn't mean you become nescient. It means that you understand the nature of the material world. And that understanding of the nature of the material world is very important. It becomes our best friend. It becomes a very good friend in our becoming spiritually self-realized, in our becoming attached to spiritual knowledge. Just like in academics, they say every text has a context, and the value of a text is known by the context. So this spiritual knowledge is valuable, it's relevant, it's so powerful because of the context that it's in, that is the material world. Because the material world is so dark, it's full of quarrel and hypocrisy. We were just reading this yesterday in the Bhagavatam class. Prabhupada is saying that this dark world of quarrel and hypocrisy, this dark age of quarrel and hypocrisy of Kali Yuga, makes it necessary that we take shelter of the Sankirtan movement. The Sankirtan movement is the solution. So the glory of the Sankirtan movement becomes all the more glorious given the fact that this has been given as a solution to the darkness of ignorance. So meaning that with the recognition that this world is so dark and full of quarrel and hypocrisy, with that recognition, the Vaishnavas and the scriptures have given us the solution of the Sankirtan Yagya. So how powerful is that Sankirtan Yagya? And how important it is to do it in this day and age? Because it's so dark, this is the only solution. Mantra 11 assures us that if we can cultivate our material knowledge alongside spiritual knowledge, we can transcend this temporary world and attain our eternal position. Material science and knowledge alone can never free us from birth, disease, old age, and death. We must strive, we must revive our eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord. Actually, the soul always exists eternally, but our material attachments bind us to this temporary world of repeated birth and death. In modern society, we seek only that knowledge which will increase our material desires and sense gratification, and thus only delivers us into the cruel hands of death. As we learn to live in this material world, we must also seek knowledge of the soul and our eternal relationship with the Supreme Soul. The goal of all knowledge is to engage even our material knowledge in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by hearing about Him, glorifying, remembering, and worshiping Him. So Lord Chaitanya says, Vidya Vadhu Jivanam, right? So the goal of all knowledge is that we can hear and chant and remember the Supreme Lord. And material knowledge can be used for that purpose. Actually, in my initiation letter, my Guru Maharaj actually wrote this. I was initiated by letter initially. And so he said that your goal of life should be cultivation of spiritual knowledge, of spiritual life, and you can use your material knowledge for this purpose. You can use your material knowledge for that goal. So this is again this verse, this 11th verse, which the material knowledge is there. Material knowledge doesn't just mean book education. Material knowledge means, like I mentioned, like the knowledge of the material world that like Prahlad Maharaj had, the observing carefully the nature of this world, understanding what is the quality of this world, what is the nature of entanglement in this material world. But material knowledge in of itself is insufficient, and therefore we should know both by material knowledge, Hiranyakashipu tried to conquer death. He did such great austerities, and he said, you make me immortal, or I should not die like this, I should not die like this, I should not die like this. But through that material path of mystic power and power, he failed. To achieve our real means of enjoyment, Prabhupada says, the real sense gratification is available in a spiritual body. It's interesting, Prabhupada uses these words, very key words here. Real sense gratification is available in a spiritual body. Meaning that Prabhupada doesn't say that we have to give up sense gratification. Our goal is enjoyment, but that enjoyment is achieved in a spiritual body. In the spiritual body, that's the place where we can actually enjoy. So real sense gratification is found in spiritual life. How to achieve spiritual knowledge? Spiritual life is achieved through following the 18 principles of Mantra 10 in the previous verse. We should make a poster of those 18 principles, post it on our wall, remind ourselves every morning. And by engaging in the Sankirtan movement, nothing will happen unless we chant. We chant japa and also kirtan, Sankirtana. That is the Yuga Dharma. So engaging in the Sankirtan movement. Knowledge of matter must be there also. We should use economic development, sense gratification, and religion to help us develop devotional service to Krishna. Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, these are also actually considered a spiritual path in the Vedic literatures. But it's actually material knowledge. But this material knowledge can be used to develop devotional service. What kind of mundane knowledge is okay to amass or to learn? What type of mundane knowledge? How to keep the body and mind fit and healthy for spiritual life. There's many verses that say this. They say one can desire a healthy life. So how to be healthy? That type of mundane knowledge is necessary. Foods should I eat? What food should I not eat? And secondly, like we've been discussing, the real nature of material entanglement, the study of Prakriti from the transcendental point of view. So therefore, for devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement, they actually don't have to gain material knowledge outside of Srila Prabhupada's books. Why is that? Because the Srimad Bhagavatam gives us the material knowledge that we need, the material knowledge that here the Isopanisad is speaking of. How does it give it? I thought Bhagavatam is all spiritual. It gives it by giving us the knowledge of Prakriti, right? This is the whole Sankhya section of the Bhagavatam, which talks about all the modes of material nature, the different elements of the material nature, the 24 elements. And someone may say, well, look, this is material. Why is the Bhagavatam talking about the material nature in the material world? And here, this verse of Isopanisad, which is non-different, which is none other than the Vedas, it is Shruti. Here, this verse is answering that question. Bhagavatam is giving that because that is actually, in some ways, spiritual knowledge. That is knowledge of the material world so that we can get out of the entanglement. Similarly, we find in the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it talks about the atomism, right? Vaisheshika philosophy, the atomic particles. It talks about the atom in the Bhagavatam. Again, that's material scientific knowledge. But that study of knowledge from the transcendental viewpoint allows us to become free of it. Therefore, they say that Sankhya and Yoga go side by side. They come together. Sankhya is the study of the material world. Why is Sankhya there? In the Bhagavad Gita, it's in there in the Mahabharata, is there in the Bhagavatam. Because Sankhya and Yoga always go together. Why? Because the yogis in traditional yogic practice, when they perform the practice of yoga, they meditate on each of the elements of the material world. And their meditation is that I am not this, I am not earth, I am not water, I am not fire, I am not air. So like this, they would like removing the layers of an onion. They would one by one remove the layers of the material conditioning from their soul. So this was actually the practice of yoga, that the yogi would study Sankhya to understand this is what I am not. He would study the material nature. He would do this study of the material elements as a way to becoming free from the entanglement. Now, in the meantime, we need the body to do the practice of yoga, to do devotional service. And so therefore, we also need the knowledge of how to keep it healthy. Just like you use a tool to open a box and get the treasure. So until the box is not open, you have to take care of the tool. You have to, oil it. You have to, maintain it. Even though the tool is not the goal, the treasure is the goal. But you have to take care of the tool in order to get to the treasure. So the body is the tool. The mind is the tool by which we are going to perform devotional service. So how important it is. This is the thing that we need, the only thing that we have to perform devotional service. So we must take care of it for our service. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, like the yogi or like the person removing the layers of the onion, we must study Prakriti with the viewpoint, with the intention of wanting to become free of it. And so the summary of mantra 11, of all mantras 9 to 11, one falls down through being involved in nescience. People involved in ordinary mundane activities will go to the darkest region of ignorance, and the materialistic intellectuals will go to an even worse place. In order to become transcendental, you don't just forget about mundane things, but you learn to understand them from the transcendental platform. In this way, you get the proper picture and you become free from Maya. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this was the class. I think we ended in very good time. We can now have questions. If anyone has any questions or comments, we've discussed a lot here, then please raise your hand. Gopal Govinda Prabhu.
Yes. These classes are getting amazing, like so much interesting topics. Thank you so much.
Actually, this Isopanisad is so amazing. It's getting more and more amazing. I agree. Because also while preparing for this and reading this, I'm like, wow. I mean, like, it's so amazing, and somehow that's why I think this is the mercy of all of you. Until this point, I never personally gave so much emphasis to Isopanisad in my own spiritual life or study. But now it's like I'm finding everything in this. It's just like every book of Prabhupada, therefore, is so valuable, isn't it? So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I still need to go through again and then revise this. Most of the questions I had, you already answered actually. And the topic is such that it is well groomed and the topic you covered very nicely. But still, I just put across one thing. The one point you mentioned that the knowledge, the partial knowledge or imperfect knowledge in the hands of people who are not so much devoted might be dangerous. In fact, I was just realizing that if even the spiritual knowledge in the hands of charismatic people, but just for the sake of their own the fame and gain and all that, it's even more dangerous. How do we protect ourselves from such things? And it's so attractive to be listening to those people, to be associating with them. And how do we protect such things?
Yes, Prabhu, very nice point that you're making. You actually bring up a very nice point. This is where Bhaktivinoda Thakur's principle of honesty comes in, where Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that for advancement in spiritual life, one of the most important principles for our own selves, this is just between us and our own heart, is to be honest with ourselves. That what is our motivation? Are we really wanting knowledge to surrender to Krishna, or are we wanting knowledge just to justify our own material desires? And I say this, and this point I find that you're making valuable, because even within our spiritual communities, even within ISKCON, we find that sometimes devotees have mentors, and the mentors will give advice to their mentees simply as a way to win their favor, right? So that they continue taking guidance from them. They give such advice so that they can flatter their mentee, and the mentee will like them, and they'll become more attached to them, and this way they get more followers, more mentors. So we can even find in our ISKCON movement, we can find mentors like this, who, whenever we have a problem or we do something wrong, they will go and they will scratch our back. So, oh, we're very nice, and scratch it. And we can surround ourselves by people like that. We can surround ourselves by, like they say, yes men, who just say yes to what we want. But real spiritual life means, real things means that no, we are looking for spiritual guidance. And that guidance can be given very nicely. No one should be chastised harshly, but we are looking for correction. We are looking for people, like in response to your question, people who don't just sound very attractive, but something that is very true and genuine. And only we ourselves can find this with the guidance of Krishna within our heart. Because see, the guru can guide us once we accept the guru, but which guru we choose, that is up to us, right? That is our decision. So I may read the scriptures which say I should surrender to the spiritual master, be obedient like this, but which guru I go to, that is up to me. Because if I don't accept even if I accept this guru as opposed to that guru, then that is my choice, and that can only be my choice. Similarly with scriptures, with scripture I read is up to me. So how do we know? The guidance of the guru only comes once we know who the pure guru is. So how do we know who's the pure guru? To this, Krishna answers in the Gita. He says that to those who are sincere, I send them a genuine guru. Those who are looking for something false, who are looking for who are looking for material religion, false religion, to them I send them a cheater. So the answer to answer your question, that is up to us. That is, we have to be very personally keen, that we have to pray to Krishna that send me to the right person. I want the pure thing. I want the real thing. Yes. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but anyway, that's
Actually, you answered both the question. There was inherent another question I had, like being a neophyte, just a beginner. The heart is pure, but beginner, so don't have that knowledge to differentiate or discriminate between the pure versus non-pure. So there's a very high chance a neophyte might get in the trap. So, but you did answer that. Pray to Krishna and look for the right way. Thank you.
Yes. Like I gave the example of my relative, right, who found this guru and she was misled. But then I have another relative who came to Krishna consciousness, like this. So why did one find this guru and continues to be with that guru? Another found someone else. Part of it is the fault of the guru, the so-called spiritualist who's misguiding people. But part of it is our fault also. If we are searching, there's some anartha there. We're not searching for the real thing. So therefore, Krishna is not showing us the real path. Because we, like that man in his head in the sand, right? Because of Krishna's putting it in front of us. So part of it is our own desire and sincerity, which also the pure devotee can reverse. If the pure devotee, that's good fortune. If they're very determined, even someone who has their head in the sand, the devotee can pull it out and give them love for Krishna. So, if they're spiritually powerful enough, they can take someone interested in false religion or materialistic religion and make them into pure devotees. But generally speaking, that's up to us. We have to take that step. The neophyte devotee, the new devotee, has to be searching for the real thing. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Ambika, yes, thank you. Ambika Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare
Very
Krishna.
wonderful class, Prabhu. Thank you very much. So in fact, actually, I was just contemplating on the answer that you gave to Prabhuji. And I think, I had the same thing, like, how do we know who is the real guru? But I think, when we were coming to Krishna consciousness, we were told that, all the spiritual masters in ISKCON, they are all pure devotees, they are all equal. But at the same time, you were saying, that okay, there might be some variations in the mentors and gurus, and they treat mentees differently. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking in the same way that it depends on us. It's all coming from us, like what are we looking for, and I think sometimes the instructions are correct, but we take it in a different way. So I think 99% is our mind, and it's us, we have to work within ourselves from us, instead of finding, oh no, this guru is that and this mentor is better. And I think so it's, I think 99% solution is coming from us, as you explained, I think in a follow-up. So thank you for explaining that, because I think that's what we were told, that you can take up to any, in the beginning stage we don't know, and we just take up the guru, any guru in ISKCON, they are all equal. That's what the common instruction is given to everybody. So thank you for clarifying that. I was thinking, I had few things in my mind. The first thing, I know you are tied up and busy, but when you get a chance, if you could share those references about Shiva Tattva that we talked in last class, if you could, please, whenever you get a chance, that would be helpful.
Yes.
So that was one of my requests. And the second thing is, I was thinking about that, you were talking, there is so much about, so much discussion in purport about universities. Universities are just here, all this universities, they give material education. And and I think you work in university, but obviously you're not, I think you are working on a different topic. So how do you feel, like, how do you find a balance? You see a lot outside in universities that it's all like material knowledge, and how one thing is, like, how do you maintain the balance? I know it's I think relatively easy for you because of all your sadhana and upbringing, but how do you find a balance of just continuing and be a good person, give everything good to them, versus like they are treating you, I think in a different way, non-devotees way. I think I'm not making sense.
Yeah.
But
no, you are actually. Yes, I understand. Actually, it's a good question that you have. So, like, let's take for our youth, right? A devotee youth who need to go to university. They need to go to university, and this is the culture of nescience, or what this text 11 says. What's the exact word used here? It says we must cultivate the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side, right? So, so I was actually thinking about this, that, okay, practically, what does this mean? That our children who are on that age, they have to go to university and they have to study. And they have to study these books and all these things and do what is natural to them, what major they want to do, all these things. But the way it becomes the culture of knowledge, and the way it doesn't, it becomes enough, is if that cultivation of that material knowledge is done as a service to the Lord, a service to the devotees, a service to our elders, and not as a way of, you could say, materialistic rebellion. Now this is the time to enjoy my senses and enjoy life and just become a materialist, and in order to, and then if that is our mood, then we will do it in a certain environment. Like I tell devotee students that you go to university for your undergraduate degree, but stay at home. and go to the university, so that you still have that spiritual atmosphere. You're coming back to a home of devotees. At night, your mind is not flying here and there. Should I go to the bar? Should I do this or not? Because I've been in that atmosphere. It's a very, very heavy atmosphere. And every devotee's child, they swear that I'm not going there for these things. I'll never do these things. They always say that. I'll never do these things. Mother, father, I'll never do these things. But it's drop by drop. It's bit by bit. You don't do these things in the first semester. You don't do them in the second semester. But gradually, you just slip. Little thing. Little happens, you slip. I remember one time when I was a university student, then we had this required dinner. Maybe I already told the story, but I had this required dinner we had to go to. So one of the main ways of disassociating yourself from the materialistic environment is not to eat with them. Like all the thing goes on in the in the lunch hour, all the, so I wouldn't go to the cafeteria to eat. I would, eat Krishna Prasadam. But there's some required dinners. So I went to this required one, and at the end they were serving alcohol. This was in graduate college. And somehow, like, there's a group of students around me that they knew me and they knew that I don't drink. And they started pressuring me. They're like, you have to try this. And I said, no, it's not good. This is bad thing. Well, he said, how do you know it's bad if you don't try it? How do you know if it's bad? You have to try this. You have to. And I remember the pressure was so great that I was almost about to try it, because they're saying, you have to try it. And then just one student in the whole group, he said, oh, guys, give him a break. Leave him alone. Like they're really, they're all after, they're like 20 boys. And just one of them spoke, oh, just, give him a break, leave him alone. And then he said that, it gave me just a little pathway out. And then I said, I agree with him. And I was out. So the thing is that, and I never did take it. But the point is that this is the subtle effect that it has, right? That association. Now, I went there just for a required dinner once. I had this one experience. But if I was going there every day, if I was eating with them every day, lunch, dinner, if I was associating with them, in the dorms, then I don't think I could have maintained my spiritual life. It would have been impossible. So a devotee child can go to the university, can get the process of nescience, so to say, can see things, and from that learn things. But then if that is their motivation, then they have to make sure that they're living in good association. So they can stay at home and go to university, or if that's not an option, they should stay with devotees. They should rent a house, live in a house, and share that house with other devotees, and then go to the university. So like this, we do things to protect our spiritual life, so that we can have the Prahlad Maharaj experience. We can see material life for what it is, and at the same time not fall into it. And if we don't fall into it, then when we're there at the university, over time, we will start seeing it. We'll start seeing that, how ignorant this is, how ignorant my friends are, how much ignorance there is at the university, in this place of so-called knowledge. And that only comes if we stay out of the ignorance ourselves. This passage I had quoted in my PowerPoint, where Prabhupada was saying that in modern society, this is very powerful. I found it to be very interesting. In modern society, even a boy thinks himself self-sufficient and pays no respect to elderly men. Due to the wrong type of education being imparted in our universities, boys all around the world are giving their elders headaches. So the thing is that even among our devotee community, we see this, that the young devotees, they are giving no respect to their parents, no respect to the elders. And they're thinking, and in our devotee community, we're thinking that this is okay. Oh, my parents are non-devotees. My parents are not Krishna conscious. So I don't have to respect them. I don't have to take care of them. I don't have to hear from them. So the success of a good education, the success of the culture of knowledge, is that we can instill these values, and where our children can happily go to the university and also accept living with devotees or living with their parents while going to the university. And if a young boy or girl is unable to have this mood, then their education is incomplete. There's no education, there's no culture, there's no knowledge there. It's only nescience. So material education is completely fine. Going to college is completely fine, but it has to be done in a context. And that context has to be spiritual culture. Spiritual culture meaning the culture of devotees, the culture of respect. Then that material nescience will not affect us, but it will benefit us.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you very much for explaining that. Prabhuji, so I think, the point that I still wanted to clarify is that there was a point that we were reading, we should not put others into anxiety. If you are sometimes in a superior position, like you are a professor and you were saying, I shouldn't put my students in anxiety, or sometimes, like because of your position, maybe parents versus children, or, like younger siblings, things like that. So, but again, like, your intention is like, for example, you give a test to the student. If they haven't prepared, if they haven't done their homework, and then they complain, oh, the professor is too hard, and they are anxious, and they are under the anxiety. That's not your problem. Your intention is not to put them under the anxiety, but it's because of their own actions. But somehow you have put them in anxiety because they haven't studied. So how do you deal with that situation?
Well, there's actually a subtle difference I find, is that one is that a student consistently does not study so much, and though they are in anxiety, it's like they expect it, they know it. And part of the reason they're not studying so much is because they're not in anxiety over their studies. They don't care about it so much, right? That's why. But then there's another thing which I've seen professors do, and also me being a student, I've seen, is that, a assignment is due at midnight. They have to electronically submit it. And a student, for some reason or the other, submits it 5 minutes late. So they do the whole assignment and they submit it 5 minutes late. And I mean, so many faculty I've seen, they'll be like, I won't accept it. It's 5 minutes late, you get a 0. So that is an example of, the student is sincere, they made a mistake. Maybe they learned something from such a strong action. In the future, they'll never make that mistake. But I can intentionally put a student into anxiety by being very harsh on them. Or I can, yes, part of the job of the teacher is to give students anxiety by giving them studies to do, or I can give them sort of anxiety that they expect, that they asked for, right? That anxiety, they asked for it. The other type of anxiety of me being unreasonably hard, of taxing their brains, which many professors enjoy doing, is you tax their brains, or you just be very inconsiderate of their situation. It's like sometimes it's very obvious that a student is going through a very difficult family situation. They come to the classroom with puffy eyes, they haven't slept, and you see there's something wrong in their life. Like they're genuinely trying, but there's something wrong in their life. And not being considerate of that, I can be, strict with them. So that anxiety they really didn't ask for. They're more looking for compassion. And like we were saying, Prabhupada says, the ultimate justice is mercy. So somewhere also they need to feel that there's people in this world that care about me. And a faculty or teacher who, if they show care for the student, it makes a big, a great impression on the mind of the student is made when they realize that a faculty member cares for them, not just is their teacher. So like that, I think that, and then we can apply that in our devotional life also, like in our day-to-day life also, that we, as far as possible, try to give up try to give people less anxiety and give them more assurance. that they have someone who loves them, who cares for them.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank
I
you very
think
much.
my connection is a little low, so something. Yes, sorry. Yes, go ahead, Mataji. Something
I was
froze.
just saying, thank you very much, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. So unless there's any other questions at this point, we can stop. It is perfect timing. It's time to end. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I will post the homework, and next time we will cover, next time I'll tell you, we'll cover verses 12, 13, and 14. And the week after that, we'll cover 15, 16, 17, and 18. And then we will be done. And those of you who have started from the beginning, you'll have completed all 4 books and you'll be Bhakti Shastris. So 2 more weeks to go. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam. Thank you so much for your very nectarian classes. They help us so much. So, Prabhuji, sorry to hold you back. Just 1 second, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, have you sent the essay questions already?
No, I
or
haven't.
did I miss it? Yeah.
Yes. So those essay questions, actually, I was thinking about that. Thank you for reminding me. That essay question, that is for the exam. And so because it's for the exam, I always send it like just maybe a week or a few days before the exam, because in some ways you can think about it like a take-home exam, right? That's the take-home part. So even though it's take-home, still it's part of the exam. So in take-home exams, you have a limited time. So I want to kind of give it at the end once we've covered everything. People have time to prepare for it, but it should be like more like an exam type of thing. So so partly due to my own laziness, I must say, partly due to my own, but also I think it's better if I just give it towards the end.
No worries, Prabhuji. That's what wanted to make sure, because then we can start preparing. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. This makes sense. Hari Bol.
Thank you, Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you for staying along and persevering through all these things. I know you've been here with us from the beginning. And,
no, Prabhuji, the credit is to you. You are able to keep us nicely. Take all of our attention, and your dedication is what is driving us, Prabhuji. Really, thank you so much. Hari Bol.
Thank you for your kind words. But sometimes I wonder how it is that all of you tolerate me so kindly, in spite of the fact that I'm very, quite unorganized at times, but also just, going a little slowly. But anyway, we've almost come to the finish line. So
thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Gopal Hari Prabhuji. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Vipin Vihari Prabhu, do you have something you wanted to say? You had
unmuted. No, just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for all the service that you are giving out to the community. And thanks to this COVID, because of this COVID, because if that has to be in person, the situation that many times we cannot go and attend the classes in person. So, but this is one nice way of, something is happening on a regular schedule, and it's happening. It's happening. Yes. So thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu. In terms of the Bhakti Shastri class, I think COVID has been our friend, because people are more at home, and especially when we started, it was like it's a great time to do Bhakti Shastri. We can't go out, we can't travel so much, so use the time to study scriptures. And many advanced devotees in our movement have done that, where when things were in lockdown, they're like, okay, this is time for bhajan. Krishna's arranged it. We really can't go out, we can't preach, although many devotees were preaching also during that time, and we should preach, but they said, well, it's still limited, so let me really study scriptures, so that once this COVID is over, then we can really preach. And I think all of you have done that. You've used your COVID season very well. You've used that year very well. And hopefully now that it's leaving gradually, we will use it and preach day and night.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna, everyone. Hari Bol. Merry Christmas.
Hare Krishna.